Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
And this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com. Welcome back to part 2 of our discussion on following up to your cold email replies. In part 2, we're going to talk about how to use out-of-office replies to your advantage, why categorizing your replies is gold when it comes to measuring and optimizing your campaigns, and finally, how to use micro commitments and reciprocity in your follow-up emails to close a sale.
Do with out of office?
That's interesting. So I've actually played around with taking a look at what's included in that out of office message. Sometimes they'll say, hey, I'm out of the office, but if you need any questions related to marketing, please contact XYZ. Then, feel free to write up an email and come clean. Just sort of say, hey, I sent an email to Richard. He mentioned you would be the appropriate person while he's gone. Can you, point me in the right direction? Free to do that, and I think it works pretty well.
But then you also carry on, obviously, the campaign on Richard, right? So when he comes back from holidays, he'll receive the next email.
Unless you get that...
Unless the other guy replies.
Yeah, exactly. And then you obviously should probably stop all communication with that company. That's done through automation, and just you have the conversation going. I mean, I've thought about out-of-office replies a little bit just because they're just kind of a part of cold email. It's interesting because a lot of times when an out-of-office message comes in, the signature will have a phone number. So maybe you can follow up on the phone in a week or so when they're back in the office.
You're basically saying that with out-of-office, you actually can fill your database with more information on that prospect.
Yes, they're telling you how to carry on while they're gone. I don't think either of us would say, sell that out of office reply to a third party in exchange for money.
No, but you can enrich your prospects.
Exactly.
That's the idea, with phone numbers and relationship in the company and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And one final note is like a lot of out of office will tell you what they're doing while they're gone. So if you can follow up just saying like, hey, hope you had a great vacation, just wanted to touch base, see if you're back, or hope that external team meeting was productive or whatever, that conference was great. Throw that in for some context. A lot of people don't do that, and that reply is going to get noticed.
Yeah, so I'm scuba diving next week.
There you go, exactly. Or I had one that was interesting. It was just a picture, an aerial shot of Burning Man, and somebody had drawn an arrow and said, I'm in this clump of people for the next week or so. And so there's an obvious conversation started that you would have no idea knowing unless you got that message. So it's just more insight that you can use to your advantage.
It's pretty cool. It's like the pickup artist, they kind of like tell you to wear really strange things, so it's a conversation starter. So it's some sort of thing, I presume.
Exactly. And also you want to, I don't know, I guess in that case, wear strange things so you stand out a little bit. If you can mention something that no other cold emailer is doing, you're going to stand out in the inbox just a little bit. It's just a slight edge that may help you get your foot in the door there.
How do you deal with bounces?
Luckily, QuickMail sort of handles a lot of that for us, where if it bounces, we don't have to worry about them getting followed up on. So it's basically a burned email that won't get contacted again, which is a good thing because the fewer bounces you have, the better your deliverability is. But it is actually good to keep tabs on what emails are bouncing, just in case if you're going through the list again and that email comes up, maybe like to a cross check, or if you're starting a new campaign with a sort of a fresh account, it may be helpful to just keep a list and remove any of those bounced emails before you go after them.
Okay, let's do one step back, by the way. I'd like to really have the audience understand the benefit of categorizing the replies. Can you list a few of those benefits?
If you categorize your responses, you're going to be able to easily tell how your campaign is performing at a much deeper level than your typical reply rate.
What do you mean? I got 25% reply rate. Isn't that great?
Yeah, maybe you have a 25% reply rate, but of your responses, maybe 80% of them are not interested and 10% are referral, and another 10% is mildly interesting. knowing those categories per campaign or even, per segment, per the kinds of people you're adding to your list. That's going to be gold when it comes to step 2 or, week 2 of your campaign where it's time to go ahead and find more contacts to reach out to. You know whether or not to double down on that list or email sequence based on the kinds of replies you're getting.
Today I was talking with a customer actually, and he mentioned that a lot of his leads are coming from different directories. So having the ability to effectively be saying like a positive reply is 80%, coming from this directory, but this directory is only 20%, even though they could be the same reply rate, is actually gold effectively, because he knows he can double down on the other directory.
And if you're not categorizing, it just makes that information much harder to tell at a glance how that campaign is performing, because reply rates at times can be misleading. Next, like I mentioned, it's going to save you time writing out replies to some of these responses. If they keep coming up again, there's a very good chance you can automate some of those follow-ups on the reply, if that makes sense. One thing to keep in mind is don't go crazy trying to categorize every single kind of response. Instead, take an 80-20 approach where of the replies that are interesting to you, find the 80% most common ones and categorize them and maybe write up some follow-ups for those particular responses. And next, if you have a team or VA helping you out, processing your inbox, you're going to be able to give them a much easier process to follow if you've got set categories for the type of responses that come in. So you can have set actions based on the kind of reply that comes in, and they can execute on that efficiently and in the right way that you would be doing it normally. That way they don't have to get creative with it, if you will. Instead, it's just sort of a manual that, if the reply says XYZ, this is how it's followed up. And then here's where a lot of the focus needs to be put in is that first message you write back to that person once they've responded. They're not always going to reply to it. They're not always going to bite, whether that's book a call or answer your questions. So if you can have a system in place that's going to automatically follow up on that person, if they don't respond, then you're going to increase the number of conversations that get carried through. Because remember, this part of the sales process is just one step. After that, you may need to bring them onto a phone call, and then that phone call needs to convert in order to get a sale, for example. So it's just one step in the funnel that they need to go through if they're to graduate your sales process, if you will.
I would even add another point, which is it will make it easier to re-engage a prospect in the future. So, for example, you could say, hey, we just built a new product. Let's see who was positively replying to our previous campaigns and just let them know that, hey, we got an extension, we got a new product. Is that worth checking out? And if you haven't categorized and you only got the response rate, well, you're going to have a tough time to very quickly be able to sort them out.
What happens when someone says, yeah, sure, send me that information that you were just mentioning? Now, obviously, that reply isn't going to put a dime in your pocket, but instead the conversation has started. So maybe we can break down what a conversation like this might look like if it's successful. So if you have someone, let's say you're writing an email and you want to use reciprocity in this email that you're creating. So you've just put an offer that something along the lines of, hey, let me know 3 of your competitors and I'll put together an analysis for you. So you get the first response in that says, all right, sure, my competitors are, X, Y, and Z. Go ahead and send me that report. So at this point, obviously, you blow them away with this report. The idea here is to make it so obviously valuable to their business that they're going to want to get more of it. Typically, a response after that, you may have to follow up and say, Sandy, did you happen to check out the report I shared with you a few days ago? Would love to get your feedback. And again, the idea is every step along the way, don't let them drop off and sort of disappear on you. You want to keep checking in until they either say yes or I'm not interested, sort of leave me alone. Notice how you wouldn't necessarily reply to that saying, okay, great, let's set up a sales call now that you've seen it. Instead, it's just check in.
It's your credit card number.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, it's just a check-in. Like, hey, did you happen to see it? Did you take a look at what we wrote up on page 2? And the key difference here is you're looking for micro commitments along the way to a sale, instead of just driving them even straight to the phone or to a demo. Sometimes, you just want, hey, did you take a look at it? And when they get back to you, then it's, okay, great. Does this make sense to, take a look at how you can get a little bit more detailed report on this? If so, we can put together maybe a 10-minute call. And then if they agree to that 10-minute call, then maybe you can schedule a 30-minute call where they bring on their co-founder, and you guys then have a proper pitch that you can dive into the full service where the sale will or will not happen kind of thing. So it's just micro commitments along the way, even after you've gotten that first reply, is how you're going to have the most success getting, that conversion.
So I like your categorizing thing. Depending on their reply, then I launch a different drip campaigns or different sequence on them. But what you just described about like going to 3, 4, 5 different touch is a lot of work. I don't want to do that. Can I just bypass a few steps? Or
yeah. Okay. Again, so it's a great question. Depending on your price point, depending on your market, you can speed up this process a little bit, where maybe you don't have to have so many nurturing points. Maybe it's just hey, would you like to see a quick video on this? You send them a YouTube link, they get it or they don't. And if they're excited, then maybe you can share a link to your sign-up page or a free trial. There's ways to cut down the time here. The idea, though, is the more you shorten this process, the more people that are going to drop off. And if you've got a high price point or a long sales cycle, it's best not to fight the length of your sales process. Instead, if you know that people need to get on the phone with you before they become a customer, then the entire email game is to get a phone call set up. From there, then you can launch into your pitch. If you've got a shorter sales process, maybe you don't need a phone conversation to sell your product or service, then maybe the whole point of your email sequence is to find out if they have a need for this or not. If they say yes, then you can guide them to maybe a sales page. It depends on your market, but again, if you want the most conversions, typically it's going to take a little bit more interaction with that lead. Just keep in mind, the closer that reply is to I'm ready to buy or sign up or whatever that may be, the less work you have on your part. But if they're getting back to you, they're requesting more information, they're referring you to a colleague, they've asked a question about your product or service, then you've still got some work to do. But luckily, you've got the conversation started, so I think 80% of the work has been done. At this point, you've sort of just got to learn a little bit more about your lead. You've got a great opportunity that now that you've got their attention, you can give them the information they need, but you can also find out really helpful things about what they are looking for in order to carry that conversation on. So it's all about them. So I think a very common response to this looks interesting, can you send me a little bit more info, is to send them a slide deck and say, hey, let me know if you want to talk. Instead, that's very much not about them. Instead, you're putting a lot of work on them, making them sort through a general stack of sort of slides that maybe some of them are interesting to them, others aren't. The point is, the more you can tailor the reply, that the follow-ups for your leads, the more you can make that conversation all about them, the faster it'll move along towards the sales process. In parts 1 and 2 of our follow-up episode, we learned that you need to categorize your most common reply types so that you can gauge the success of your campaign, follow up more efficiently, and maybe outsource the entire process to your VA. Next, we talked about following up on your follow-ups. Just because you get the first reply in doesn't mean that your work is over. Use automation to ensure that your leads don't go cold after their initial reply. Finally, don't rush your sales process once you've gotten that reply. Instead, use the power of micro commitments to get your leads to take the next logical step in the sales process, whether it's scheduling a short phone call or reviewing a custom report. Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high vibe by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast
so they can send awesome emails
and make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.